And we're live with Vance, Nevada, coming live to us from Vancouver.
How are you doing, gentlemen?
Doing great.
Hola, hello, que pasta?
All is well. We're just waiting for pandemic restrictions to lift and wrestling to resume.
That's right.
That's what we're waiting for.
That's it. So, Vance, can you tell us about all the stuff you do? You do lots of stuff. You're jack of many trades, kind of like me and Eddie.
Yeah, and it always starts very innocuously. I started wrestling professionally when I was 17 years old in Winnipeg, and working with the independent promoters there, very low budget stuff. So very early on, as an ambitious guy trying to make the business go, they would say, "Oh, well, we don't have anybody to do the legwork in the town to go do posters." We're like, "Oh, well, I could probably take that on." Next thing you know, you're involved in some of the promotion stuff, and writing press releases for the newspapers, and getting involved a little bit in the creative and the booking. But then also very early on, when you start that young and you get into wrestling, I mean, like anything, at 18 years old, you think you know everything about everything. And so I thought the same of wrestling. I'd been a fan my whole life, got into the wrestling business, and just quite by chance, early on, we had television in Winnipeg, and I was watching back the broadcast, and one of the commentators had made reference to a wrestler named Frenchie Champagne. And said, "Oh, Frenchie Champagne, a legendary Manitoba wrestler. He was tag team partners with Ernie Rowe, who trained Vance, Nevada." And I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never heard of Frenchie Champagne. I never heard his name mentioned, but I know everything there is to know about wrestling, and so he must not be a very big deal. But it spiked my curiosity, and so I started to go and do some research. Through the old. I mean, this is before online newspapers. This is sitting in the libraries and hand reeling microfilm to find out who the hell is Frenchie Champagne. And it turned out in the Manitoba area in the 1950s and 60s, Frenchie Champagne was like the top babyface on the independent scene at that time. And as I started to pull back the layers a little bit, it just got me hooked on actually researching the documented history of pro wrestling in Canada. And it's become almost we started as a hobby. It's become a sick obsession that now I'm too far in. The collection of results now is 4,600 pages from 1876 to the present. So I'm just too far in to stop.
Right,
is there any end?
Let's get let's settle the debate. Who has the better wrestlers, Canada or the United States?
Oh, jeez. What kind of question is that?
I want to know.
Well, I think it's if you're going talent for talent. I mean, we would be here all night debating the merits of one wrestler versus another. By sheer volume, America has produced a lot of talent.
Sure.
But if you look at the Canadian side, yeah, there's a lot of great wrestlers produced out of Canada, but like the U.S., it's proportionate in that for every Bret Hart, you have 50 guys that never should have had a contract or a sniff of a contract.
Well, do you consider the Bulldogs coming out of Canada? Because I kind of do.
There's a lot of guys that I think we should lay more claim to. Andre the Giant being one.
Interesting.
He started in France in '66, but when he came to Canada in '71, working with the Vachons and the Dukes and Gino Brito, they were the ones that really trained him from sort of this European style wrestler that's more on the fundamentals and less performance to become a marquee attraction. And so after 3 or 4 years, in Quebec, working with the Vachons, that's when Andre's career took off. And as soon as the American promoters got their hands on him, he became a huge legendary star.
So when you're doing your research like this, how do you research? Explain to people where you're finding this information, and where do you use your research? What are you doing with all these pages?
Well, originally, I had no intention. I actually was looking for this connection between Frenchie Champagne and the guy that trained me. And as it turned out, that that soundbite was completely fictional. There was no overlap in the careers of Ernest Rowe and Frenchie Champagne. But I would start with going to the newspapers, and when I was wrestling, this was really handy for the research, because if I was wrestling in Calgary, I would say, okay, I got to go to Calgary. I'm going to hit the town early so I can get an hour or two in the library in the afternoon before I have to go to the arena, and go and scroll through microfilm, and you'd find a date and you'd be like, okay, we know Calgary promoted every Friday night. So I only need to look at the Friday paper that would have the ad for the show, or the Saturday paper that would have the results. So you're hand cranking to find the dates, and you start to get a rhythm for the newspapers. Now it's much easier, with the online papers, keyword search. Over the past several weeks, I've been researching the history of the Montreal territory. And so if you're looking at the Rougeau's promotion, I just need to put in keyword Rougeau, and now here we go. We got Montreal Monday, Chicoutimi Tuesday, Quebec City Wednesday, Ottawa Thursday, Sherbrooke Saturday night, and put it all together. And I think, when we looked at the results that were available, if you're a results guy and looking at the history, typically what you would see a generation ago, you'd have people would say, yeah, here's all the results from Stampede Wrestling. No, what you've got is a sequence of Calgary, the history of that city. And what I was always interested in was the full schedule that a wrestler would keep, because particularly when you talk to wrestlers, and it's not to discredit their legacies, but the calculation that someone would have for their career track record was always a rough estimation, because nobody kept records. And so one of the numbers that you hear from these legendary guys all the time is, I wrestled 6,000 matches in my career. And it's done by this crude calculation of, well, I wrestled for 300 days a year for 20 years. Okay, that adds up to 6,000. To date, I've not come across anybody that's wrestled 6,000 matches. I think the guy that I've sort of registered that had the most was Lou Thez, and that was over 4,000 still. It's a lot of matches. But starting to collect the results. In 2009, I released a book, Wrestling in the Canadian West, which was really written like a sports almanac for pro wrestling in the West 4 provinces, that actually had, a factual account of the title histories and stats based on the matches that guys had worked. That was the beginning. What I found when I was researching that book, I'd maybe try to go and talk to guys that I was on the road with, and I'd get really excited about the research, like almost a history nerd. And I'd be like, hey, I've got this binder full of all these results. Could you take a look? And guys would look, and they'd be just overwhelmed. They'd be like, I don't know what's missing, man. You got a lot of stuff in there. So I started to actually distill their own career out of there, because I thought, you might not be able to identify, hey, where was I 10 years ago on a Tuesday night in February? But if you can just see it as your own career, you might notice where the gaps are. You say, well, you know what? I was in the Maritimes during this period of time, or I was wrestling in Texas during this period of time. And it would help to direct that a little bit. But that became a project unto itself, because you'd have guys, one guy in particular, Don Leo Jonathan, had a very long career from the 50s to the 80s. He was a second generation guy, legendary guy. When I interviewed him, when I was doing my book, as a thank you, I came back a second time and said, hey, Don Leo, thanks for spending time with me. Here is your career. And had 2,800 matches of his career all over the world. And he was just so flattered and so touched by that gesture that I thought, this is really something that I can do that's unique, that I can give back to the wrestling community and to the wrestlers who have paved the road for guys like me to be able to do this. And so it became sort of a side pursuit as I would find results. Okay, well, I know I'm going to Las Vegas to Cauliflower Alley Club. I'm going to see Alexis Smirnoff there. I'm going to do up Alexis Smirnoff's career record. And it became just kind of a thing where I would, pack 4 or 5 of these record books that I would compile over the year and bring them to Vegas and really help to build a rapport with some of these guys as well. So it's been sort of a fantastic side passion project.
Right. So about 10 years ago, you put out Wrestling with Wrestling in Canadian West with Crowbar Press, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have more books?
That was, I mean, I haven't released another book since that one. I've been sort of consulted for lots of projects. So,
Oh, okay, yeah.
I get acknowledgments in a lot of the credits for other books. So Stephen Verrier's books on Gene Kiniski, the Pat LaPrade and Bertrand Hebert's books on Mad Dog Vachon and Andre the Giant. So it's very cool. I did an interview with Keith Greenberg for his new book that's out, Too Sweet, and Inside the Indie Wrestling Revolution. But yeah, I'm just now. It's kind of advantageous, I guess, because the longer that we've been shut down and there's no active wrestling happening, I'm starting to like climb the walls. It's very creative guy, so we need to find another outlet here. So I've been every free minute, back on the computer and looking through these old newspapers, and now looking at maybe expanding on the wrestling in the Canadian West and doing like sort of a national professional wrestling almanac for Canada.
Oh, okay.
So that's on the horizon, and we're digging deep into that every day.
Wow.
Can you tell us about your newsletter with Cauliflower?
Yeah, that's been kind of an exciting opportunity. I got involved with the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2010. I'd actually been nominated for the James Melby Historian Award because of the book. And Scott Teal had put my name forward and said, I think that you've done something really monumental here. We're going to put your name up. And when I went to Las Vegas, met Carl Lauer, Dean Silverstone, and Bob Leonard. Were key guys. And they knew that I was sort of a student of the game, still young in my career. And they pulled me aside and said, we think we'd like you to get involved with the club. You have the right passion for the wrestling game. And so I was involved with some of their committees, awards committees over the years, and was a writer for the newsletter. And then Dean Silverstone got in touch with me about this time last year and said, hey, we're looking to make a change with the newsletter. Would you be interested to take it on? And I didn't hesitate. I thought, this is fantastic. It's just another way to contribute to the work that the Cauliflower Alley Club does. And it's also a way to stay connected, because sometimes, in the wrestling industry, you can get very regionally isolated. You start to see, the same faces and the same people all the time. And because I'm, beyond the stage in my career where I'm chasing a contract or trying to get a job in the wrestling business, real life has set in, family and kids and career. Wrestling is, a hobby that I still pursue. It's just a great way to reconnect with people and draw upon those networks of all of the great wrestlers and historians and writers that I've connected with over the years, and create a forum for them to get involved with the club and share their insights and their passions for the sport as well.
So Kenny, before you jumped on, we were talking about, before we went live, we were talking about the Death Tour, the Canadian Death Tour that he's done 4 times. Yeah,
if you're in Winnipeg, it's sort of the rite of passage that, if you haven't done the Death Tour, you're not a real wrestler. and so I had to go do this thing one time to say that I did it, and then I had to go back the second time to prove that it didn't beat me.
So what is the Death Tour exactly?
So the Death Tour is a kind of a infamous tour in Canada that takes place every February in northern Manitoba. So for geographic reference, think Fargo, North Dakota, and then go another 300 miles north. And the reason that it happens only in February every year is the weather needs to be so cold that the rivers and lakes freeze enough that you can drive across them.
Oh, gee.
And wow. So for 11 months out of the year, these communities up there, they're mostly, I'd say they're all native reservations. And so for 11 months of the year, all supplies have to be flown in. And so they have this very exciting time for them where they've got about a 3 to 4 week window where they've got a road. And so they're able to truck in supplies.
We have a road.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
so it's a tremendous undertaking. Like they get all excited and they've got the bulldozers out, like clearing snow off of the top of the lake so that they can create this ice road. And they've got just like these little caution tape kind of flags on the edge of where the road is, because you can go snowblind up there. You get yourself into a snowstorm and you're driving along the ice, but you can't see where the edge of that boundary is. And if you go out of bounds, as they're prepping the road, they actually flood that part like you would with a hockey rink. So kind of create extra layers of water to thicken the ice up, but only on the road portion. So if you're not mindful of where you are, if you were to go off into a snowbank, that's it. You're in the lake. You're done. They'll never see you again. So you drive. It's about 5 hours from Winnipeg. You go north, and then you see like the last paved road that you're going to see for about a month, and then you turn off into the bush, and it's really this crude, almost like pencil drawn fishing map that you're working with to get to the towns. When you go into these communities, you actually start to welcome the ice road part, because the muskeg trail that goes through the woods, that's very crudely carved out, is rough ride. Then you get to the lake, and Tony Condello, who is the promoter of the tour, notoriously likes to scare the new guys that come, particularly if they're Americans and have never like driven on an ice road before. When you're driving on ice, and people from Minnesota and some of the northern states might be aware of this, you want to hear a little bit of a crackle as you go on the ice, because it's indicating that there is airflow underneath. And so as you're driving, the water's pushing back against the ice. It's kind of creating a little bit of a wave under the ice. So you can't drive very fast, maybe 15 miles an hour across the ice. If you don't hear that crackle, then you've reached a point where there isn't the right things happening under the ice, and it's too thin, and you go down. And so sometimes you'll be halfway across a lake and you realize, hey, I'm not hearing that crackle anymore. And then you'll see these traffic cones, and like half of a bulldozer or half of a snow grader sticking out of the lake. And you're like, oh, why are we still driving? And yeah, so you carry on. So you might have a 3-hour drive through the bush and across ice roads to get to these towns. But over the years, the relationship with those communities has become very combative in itself. So you get to the community, there's no hotels, and no restaurants in these communities. Like they're really isolated, native communities. So you show up, you've got your bag with your wrestling gear, you've got your bag with your clothes, you've got an additional bag with your sleeping bag and your pillow, because you're going to be sleeping on the gymnasium floors. And then you got a fourth bag because you got to haul in your own food. And so you got, all of the tuna and macaroni and cheese that you're going to never stomach for the next 6 months. And so you show up in the town, set up the ring, you wrestle your match, tear down the ring, kick the people out, maybe steal one of the mats off of the ring if you're fast enough. You cook your dinner in the kitchen, in the school kitchen, get to sleep and then get up the next day and do it again. But what's really unforgiving is the temperatures in northern Manitoba in February are about minus 40 degrees.
Wow.
So very, very harsh conditions.
That's crazy. So, and you're out there for 3 weeks?
Yeah, typically you go out, and the reason that they call it the death tour is because it would seem like these conditions are obvious why you call it the death tour. You could die. When you go into these communities, they're very traditionally rooted. And so in the First Nations culture, if somebody dies, the whole town goes into mourning for 7 days. So they shut down all the stores, and everything for 7 days. So if you've shown up in the community and you go in to see the chief and council and say, hey, we're arrived, we're here for wrestling tonight. And they say, oh, we got some bad news for you. We had a death last night. The show's canceled. So you've driven 10 hours across the wilderness to get to this town for nothing. Show's canceled, but you're there. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to be. So you just don't get to unload the ring that day, but you're still going into the school and sleeping on the floor and cooking in the home ec room kitchen. The worst year I can remember over the course of the tour, we had 6 deaths. So that's 6 days. Particularly if you're a novice and you're getting paid by night, that's 6 paydays you've lost over the course of that tour. So pretty brutal.
I mean, how many people are in attendance for these things? Because you guys are in the middle of nowhere. So,
you know what's happened is they've started doing that tour in about 1989, and so it's become kind of the annual tradition. Like every February, the wrestlers are coming to town. We're going to be at the school, which is really the only public venue for events. In the winter, so. They all have these kind of like closed circuit radio stations. Sometimes they have a little bit of like a cable access kind of a closed circuit TV. So usually the first stop is you get to the school, you got a crew working on the ring. Tony goes down with a couple of wrestlers to get on the radio or the local TV station, cut the promo. Hey, wrestlers are back. We're going to be here tonight. Some towns, because of how far they're away from the other towns, are a double shot. Or if they're traditionally a high drawing crowd. And then, you get at her. So typically, I mean, the whole community comes out. There's no other entertainment.
Right.
And so you'll get, 300 to 500 people, however many people you can fit into that gymnasium. And really, really raucous crowds where I would say in some degree, the children, particularly in the community, they've never been outside of their town. I mean, their only connection to the outside world is what they've seen on television. And so some of the, I would say, niceties that we would recognize, wrestling in, Philadelphia or some little town down the road, where kids have a bit of a fear of the wrestlers and know, we don't want to go and punch that guy because there could be repercussions for that. In the First Nations communities, the culture is you're not allowed to touch the children. So we had a situation one time where we're wrestling a match, and I was actually myself and another heel, and we were wrestling against the Singh brothers. This is about 2007. And so in the finish of the match, they gave us a double sunset flip for the win. And as we were getting pinned, some kid reached over the bottom rope and punched my partner right in the eye.
Oh man!
and there's nothing we can do about it. In other environments, you'd like get out of the ring and go chase the kid, and they know you can't touch him. So we're on our way to the back, and these kids are coming up and they're kicking and punching us like on our way back to the dressing room. And we were near the end of the tour, and finally I had enough, and I turned around, and there was this big fat kid, and I just shoved him with both hands as hard as I could, and he's in his parka because it's winter, and he skidded in his parka along the gym floor about 20 feet, just in complete shock. That guy touched me. He's not allowed to do that. And I got to the locker room, and I was like, oh shit, like this could be a big problem. Like, we're not allowed to do this. We are a long way from home. And there's only one road out of town. And so luckily it got smoothed over and the police did not have to be involved.
So, Eddie, I'm going to tell a story like that. I've got one time when I had to defend myself. I was a professional wrestling manager quite a bit. I played Kimchi for Kamala a couple times up and down Northeast area, and eventually got to be writing his book and the whole deal. That's what kind of spawned this. But one time as Kenny Casanova, I was leaving the ring, came out past a group of kids. They were 18, 19, 20, probably right out of high school. And I kind of did like this, like I was going to wipe a booger on one of them. And just as I was about to get through the gorilla and through the curtain, a kid jumped me and put me in like a rear naked choke and jumped up on my back. And he started he scratched like down my back. So I had like the Wolverine or like the Bruce Lee scar on my back.
Right.
And he bit like the back of my head, like he was biting me. Like there's something wrong with this guy. So right when I got back there, I'm like, you know, he's got me in this chokehold, and I'm kind of like this. And finally, like a security guard that was back there pulls the kid off of me, and I looked and I was like, "What I do?" And the kid's all struggling. He's all struggling. Two guys held him. I punched him right in the nose as hard as I could. Now I'm a manager, so I'm not really like the big wrestler, but I broke his nose. I broke his freaking nose. Yes. And the kid went down, right? And New York State Athletic Commission comes over and sees him. There's blood on his nose and the whole deal. And he knew what happened, and he just kind of he said, "What's your last name again?" "Oh, we don't have it down." He's like, "Okay, we'll see you later." He told me to take off, essentially. And I took off, and nothing ever became of it. Maybe 10 years or so later, he brought it up again. He was like, "Remember the kid who broke his nose?" He's like, "That was awesome." So
sometimes we just got to thank our blessings.
Yeah. I could have gotten in trouble for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So Kenny, you're familiar with the death tour, right?
I've heard of it, but I didn't know it to that degree. Like I worked for these different, real bad situations where I would have like 3 or 4 of those conditions, but never all like 10 or 20 that he just listed off ever all at once. So it was kind of neat to hear.
Well, I'm looking up some of the people that have done it that some people might know is Edge, Christian,
okay, yeah,
Lance Storm, Kenny Omega, obviously Vance Navada, Chris Jericho, Scott Norton.
Sounds like it hardened up some of these guys and put a name on them, right?
Yeah, famously, like some guys, cracked, because of this. I mean, Scott Norton has nothing kind to say about Tony Condello as a result of their interactions from that tour. Edge, they have a story. I think it's on his DVD. They play it on loop sometimes on the network, talking about Rhino crying in the back of the van.
Well, it says Rhino was on a van that almost fell through the ice.
You know what? There's a lot of situations. There was actually a tour that I did where we went further north. I had done the Condello tour a couple of years. And it was kind of like a default. I knew he was going to call, and I had no reason to say no. So I said, I got to get booked somewhere else. So I've got a reason to decline the death tour this year. And so there was a promoter out of Calgary. They ran as the Can-Am Wrestling Federation. They said, we've got a 7-week tour. Are you interested? I said, yeah. I didn't even ask where it was. I just said, yeah, I'm in. And they were going to the Northwest Territories, which is like up by Alaska. And it was even further north, and we were driving on a road one time, and we're going to the next town, and they actually have like barricades on the road that say unsafe for travel. Like the circle with the red line through it, no trucks, no cars. So we're like, okay, we're not doing that town. So we called ahead, moved on to the next town. I guess they had made arrangements. Some of these towns were bought shows. So they already had the money, so they were committed to do the date. So we went and we did the rest of the loop and came back and got it on our way back. And these signs are still there that say no trucks, no cars. And they said, no, we called ahead of the town. It's good. We're cool. So, all right. So we're driving through this wilderness trail, and I was driving. And we came up over the hill, and I can see we're coming down to the water now. And having done these tours, like when you're looking at ice that you're going to drive on, this sounds like such a peculiar safety topic. Please, kids, do not try this at home. But when you're looking at ice that you can drive on, it's practically white because it's so thick. And we were coming down over the hill, and I could see like there was a very distinct line from the riverbank to the river. It was dark. And so I stopped the van. I said, listen, I'm telling you, this river is not safe for us to cross. They said, yeah, it is. We called ahead of the town. They said, everything's perfectly cool. I said, I'm telling you, I'm going to get out of the van and walk across. I'll meet you on the other side. And so they said, well, somebody go out and test it. This guy's a chicken. He's scared. He's, whatever, blah, 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 any derogatory thing that we can't say on the air. But so they decided, well, we'll send one of the wrestlers out there to check the quality and strength of the ice. And so they sent one of the midget wrestlers out there.
Nice.
And he goes out to about the middle of the river, and he's jumping up and down. Well, he's only 110 pounds, but he looks like a baby duck trying to take off. And they're like, see, it's fine. I'm like, he's 110 pounds, and we're talking about a 1,200-pound van here. So they send a couple of heavyweight guys out. And one of them wrestles by the name Massive Damage, and he walked along the edge and actually went through up to his waist.
Wow.
And so I said, well, like that should be all the indication you need. Like, this
Right.
is not safe. Like a man has just gone through the ice. No, they said, no, that was just over there. We should be fine over here. And they decided to try it anyway. And they inched it forward. And sure enough, as soon as the front two wheels got on the ice, boom, went through. So now we're hung up, minus 40 degrees in February in the Northwest Territories, hung up on the riverbank, no cell phones, trying to figure out a solution to get around. So what ended up happening after several hours, they called back to the town that we had just wrestled. Somebody came out with a bulldozer and pulled us out of the river. The crew in the van went back to that town and got some sleep. Then the folks from the host town came out with a bulldozer and just basically bulldozed us a new path through the woods, and the show went on.
Wow.
Yeah. But
the van was okay and all. Well, it didn't flood or anything, eh?
No, on that occasion we were okay. But I mean, I would say on the Candelo tour at least once, but probably more. We have like these like push out parties because you're going down a snow road. You got a bit of snow blindness going on. You veer off the path. You end up in a snowbank. Everybody gets out of the truck, pushes us out of the ditch, and carry on. And it becomes almost a daily occurrence on some of these treacherous roads. But yeah, now it's just a great story. But I'll never go back.
Really?
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, after that situation where the van actually went in the ice, I had actually swore off any dates north. I mean, from Vancouver, where I was living at the time, I said, if I'm going anywhere in February, we're going south. We'll go work in Washington or California.
So what happens if you decide to do the tour, and then like a couple of days in, you're like, I'm done. I'm out of here.
You know what? It has happened.
How do you get out of there?
It would be at a significant expense because there is a plane service.
Okay.
So you could take like a charter plane out of there. I mean, you're probably gonna spend your whole payoff for the tour just to get back to Winnipeg, where you can get a connecting bus or plane or train or if that's where your car's parked. But there's certainly been times where guys have gotten up there, and if you're not traveling with a good crew, like if there isn't a good rapport among the wrestlers that are on the tour, if there's any conflict or any rift in that locker room, like you're together like 23 hours a day. Like there's no way to avoid each other. You're traveling in the same van, you're sleeping in the same room, essentially, the same gymnasium. You're cooking together, you're wrestling together. So when those personality conflicts blow up, they blow up bad.
Who was on your tour? Do you remember some of the names?
The first couple years, it was 2000 and 2001. I don't think there's any names on those trips that you'd recognize. Then I didn't go on that tour for a couple of years. When I went to do the Northwest Territories tour, Phil LaFawn was on those tours, and Sarita was her first tour. Then she went on to great success, 2002. Later on, when I was in Vancouver, I started to take on a role as a trainer, and I agreed to go back on the tour as an opportunity to get some of the young guys the same experience. And so at that time, the Singh brothers were just coming up. Kyle O'Reilly was in that class. I don't think he came on the trip. But yeah, the Singh brothers, they liked it, and actually went back a second year. And so they convinced me. They said, "Hey, we're going back. You going to come with us?" And I was like, "I don't really want to. I just wanted to make the introduction, get you guys booked." Like, well, if we're going to go, we want you to go. And so I did agree to go back the second year, and then that was it. I said, "No more."
Eddie mentioned Edge and Christian, so it would have been Sexton Hardcastle and Showtime Christian Cage. Were they on shows with you? I thought they were more east than
Yeah,
your
Candelo was kind of their first big break. Like they had worked more in the Toronto area.
Hutchinson, yeah.
Yeah, but in the early 90s, like this is I want to say Edge broke in same year as me, 93. They were working for Candelo in 94, 95,
Yeah.
96, 97, like right up until Edge got signed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, right around 97, 98, he was even coming down New York area and Mass and Boston, and I did some shows with him, and he had a little short manager with him, handsome Johnny Bradford, who I think was legit deaf and would miss a lot of his spots because he was deaf. Like he wouldn't hear certain things.
Yeah.
Interesting though, they kept him around. I think he did a lot of their driving and stuff.
Yeah. So I missed out because I'd started like in one of the local independents in Winnipeg, and there was always like this conflict between Candelo and the local guys.
Okay.
Because a lot of the bookers and the guys that were running the organization were like kind of like split offs from Candelo. So it's like if you worked there, you were automatically
you couldn't at the other. Yeah.
Automatically you had heat.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until a little bit later on then I started working for Candelo and
yeah. That's the same thing in the States. You know, it's rather than work with the neighbor promoter, he's your enemy. You know, so
yeah.
Recently, a buddy of mine, Brett Williams, Buttery Burt Williams, you got some information from him and something you were putting together for Vermont, I guess, northern Vermont territory, which is considered somewhat in Canada, I guess.
Yeah.
What's that for? Do you know what I'm talking about? He's a good friend of mine. We kind of trained him out this way.
Yeah. So, you know, when I started looking at Montreal, like, I mean, when you think about my interest in history, it started specifically with Winnipeg and started specifically looking for one guy. And then it's like, well, you know, you get so far along, you're like, well, maybe I could take on Stampede Wrestling. Like that wouldn't be too much more work. And then the next thing you know, it's like, well, maybe we should add Vancouver. That's an interesting territory. And so like now, I mean, Winnipeg was never a territory on its own. It was really it was one of the stops for AWA.
Okay.
So it was like a Minneapolis town, you know, once every 3 weeks, the Winnipeg Arena. We had a very active independent scene there always from about the 1950s, you know, even to today. Vancouver and Calgary, I pretty well have like a nightly schedule for those territories for their whole run. So Vancouver, you know, every night for the territory and Stampede. If anybody ever says I went through Stampede and I don't know their name, they're bullshitting. They were not there. But a lot of guys have thrived on that. I mean, we've certainly run into guys at different times that have given us a fictional past of their career from somewhere else. You know, like, you know what? I broke in Canada. Stu Hart in the dungeon. Yeah, sure you did. Because there was no records to prove otherwise. So you just kind of nod and smile and go, I think that's bullshit, but I can't prove it.
Well, it is wrestling and it's all the work, right?
Yeah. So when I started digging in on Eastern Canada, it was a little bit harder because I'm now not traveling as a wrestler anymore. So there's no opportunities to get into those libraries because I'm in the towns. But there was also more promotions running there. So you think about Toronto, you had the Tunnies that ran Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, but they also had a big enough crew that they were running. Like when you look at the lineups for those Toronto shows, they had like 10 matches on them in the 70s. You know, from a logistics standpoint, if you've ever run a wrestling show, you're wondering like, how did they bankroll a crew this size? And that's because they were running a full schedule with 2 crews throughout the week. So everyone would get together for Thursday night in Toronto. But then the next night, the crews would split off, and you had like one crew doing one loop, another crew doing another. So they might be running Hamilton and Niagara Falls on the same night, or London and Kitchener. So I'm like, wow, that's going to be a bigger project. It's not like once you know the rhythm of the loop, you can put it all together. So started with Ontario because information was more readily available, and it was actually Pat LaPrade that had given me a link and say, hey, here's a great link that has all the Quebec newspapers, but they're all in French. And I know a little bit of French. But I think that when you look at results that are out there on different message boards and things like that, there's not a lot on Quebec because most of the researchers are American guys that don't know French. And so now we're getting into territory and actually putting results together that have never been published before, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But when they started to put the night to night schedule, I think, the Canadian territories, it was always interesting because you would see results at the time, especially if it's not put together. Someone would research Vancouver, or maybe they would do Tacoma, Washington. And you look and you go, oh yeah, there's kind of the same wrestlers happening, in the area at the same time. But then when you put the schedule together, you realize, okay, this was All-Star Wrestling out of Vancouver because this Tacoma date fits into their loop. And so the same thing with Burlington, Vermont. When you look at the dates as a standalone, you're like, oh yeah, there was an obvious tie there to Montreal. But when you see the schedule, you're like, oh, okay, here it is. No, this definitely was Eddie Quinn, promoting. But what was interesting about, the Montreal territory, there's probably like a greater level of cooperation among the promoters than anywhere else. So Eddie Quinn, if you ever read anything about Eddie Quinn, he was a true showman and really relished the fact that, he was pulling down $1.3 million a year in 1957 from wrestling promotions, and was very grandiose. But he was supported by the local promoter, Lucien Gregoire, who really controlled all of the Montreal talent. And so Eddie Quinn was primarily dealing with Yvonne Robert and Larry Moquin and any of the big name American guys that were coming in to work with his local baby faces. But Gregoire was promoting the other towns. And so, Quebec City, for example, Gregoire would run his independent show with the undercard guys on Monday night. Eddie Quinn would go in and run it on Friday night with the big names. But it would still have some of those guys that they're familiar with, on Monday, like Art LeGrand and Eddie Auger and George Cagney. And the same thing with Burlington in particular. So if Eddie Quinn was running it on Thursday night every week, well, on Wednesday night, Lucien Gregoire would run with his indie guys. Same venue, same town, back-to-back nights. So really, really interesting in terms of the context of when we move forward. This was a model that was working when there was real money to be made in wrestling. And now you got these independents that are only drawing 150 on a good night. They're so competitive about their 150 and can't cooperate with the guy down the road at all. So it's really interesting for me. I don't know if it would still work that same way if you get that level of cooperation among promoters to network that way, but really, really fascinating. And Brett has done a tremendous job with Vermont and New York and the whole Northeast in terms of, producing new information that hasn't been published before.
Now, Vance, you've worked with some big name talent before, correct?
I have.
Like Jim the Anvil, I believe, right?
I worked with the Anvil, yeah.
What was that like?
It was never the same experience twice. I enjoyed working with Anvil. He was very focused, and it was a kind of a, if he didn't, before he developed a rapport with you, he was very guarded in what you were going to be doing in the ring with him on any given night. And because he was so big and powerful, and people don't realize, he's a barrel-chested guy, 280 pounds. He's not going to do anything he doesn't want to do.
Right.
So if you got him on a night when he was really lucid and really in the mood to perform, it was fantastic. Not every night was like that, but my experiences with him were always very positive. I think it's like that of most guys of that era. If you get a guy who, for whatever reason, is taking a liking to you and shows up just motivated that day, and they really want to perform, they're going to give you something that's really unique and a takeaway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Anybody else that you've worked with that we would know?
I had a chance to work with Honky Tonk Man in several tours, East Coast, West Coast.
Oh, okay.
Matt Bourne,
Nice.
Tatanka, Tito Santana, Bushwhacker Luke. And this is, Bushwhacker Luke, this was 2009, late in his career, and he's still a guy who was just a tremendous workhorse and just a tremendous attitude. Just showed up to work every day, excited, and wanting to do stuff at a level that I wasn't comfortable with. You're working with a guy now who's approaching 70 years old. He's got a artificial hip, and he still wants to take any bumps that you're giving to any of the younger guys on the crew, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. So.
Nice guy. He's going to be on the Con, by the way. It's going to be him
cool.
back with Butch. They're going to do a little talk. They got a book coming up with John Crowther, who does a lot of the comic books, but he's doing an actual book I'm going to help him put out. And I think Fred Ottman might sit in with them, and I think Coco might jump in too. So there's going to be a little like old school WWE roundtable action there. So
Luke is great, and I think one of the things I appreciate about him the most is that he's still very sharp, with dates and times and places. Where when you talk to other guys, they can be very vague and grandiose about, well, I don't remember anything about that time. It was just crazy. We were making money, and that's all I know. But when Luke and Butch first came to North America, their first stop was in Montreal. And they did a tour there with the Vachons, who were running Grand Prix Wrestling out of Montreal at the time. And then they went west, and they worked with Stu. And then they went further west. They worked the Vancouver territory. Worked for Portland. So I asked them a question the other day because I was putting together, sort of trying to figure out the schedule. So we know that the Vachons were running this series of towns. Well, how did their TV tapings work into that? And how are they doing the TVs? And, he can still remember it sharp as it was yesterday. And this is like 1972, 1973. So fantastic. I'm glad that he's still around and is still a resource, because so many guys that you would think that we could ask questions to, we simply have missed that opportunity. They're not with us anymore.
Right.
Yep.
So as your research brought you over to Dave McKigney and the Bear Man, or the Wild, the Wild Man, I guess. A friend of ours, Wes, is actually working on a book, Maidment, and I'm helping him put that out as well. And I just recently picked up a couple of neat posters off of him. And here, I don't know if I can show you. I got this poster come a week or so ago.
Oh, and cool.
Nice.
And I got this one too. So
love it.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So
Wes is a guy,
Wes?
Yeah, I had occasion to meet him in person. We corresponded, of course, lots. Cool. Because when wrestling fans, we're a pretty small community. When you really get down to it, particularly if you're a fan of wrestling history, it's even smaller. Right. But I was in Ontario a year or so ago, and happened to be kind of in his neighborhood, and we went out for lunch.
Oh, nice.
And he's one of those guys that he's got a notebook, and his handwritten results from back in the day. And I feel like a lot of the research that remains now is not in the public archives. Like, we've exhausted everything that existed from the newspapers. Now what remains in wrestling history is a lot of what these long-term fans like Stephen Ash and Cliff Ketchison and Wes Maidment and whatever have collected themselves and are now sitting in a closet somewhere.
Right.
Maybe they don't know anyone's looking for it. It just has sentimental value to them.
Ed, did you interview him? You did, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he was the one with all the posters behind him. He had like hundreds of them.
Now the ones that you have come, are those vintage or are those reprints?
No, those are actual ones. He found another guy who had handfuls of them. He was selling Rudy. Can't think of his last name.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and he was selling off some of his collection. He hooked me up with that guy and picked them up, and they're pretty cool. I wanted one particular nice Andre one and one Sheik one. I did Sabu's book. Yeah. So I did a lot of research on the Sheik, the original Sheik, and I wanted that poster with him on it because he helped a lot with it.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
yeah, I think that Sheik poster that you've got there from Midland, I think was very similar to the inspiration for the original book about the Bear Man's territory.
Right. The Scott Teal Heat. Something Heat, right? Oh,
yeah. So Scott Teal did a reprint of it, a re-release of it.
Right, right.
But the original one had the cover of it looked like a Bear Man poster.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I have a stolen copy from the University of Manitoba Library.
That's the move.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have neat memorabilia or anything that you've collected over the years?
You know what? Over the years I did, because I had, wrestled and, I've been wrestling for 27 years. And so you'd collect stuff, over the years, from time to time. And now, since I've been largely out of wrestling, in 2013, I retired and got out completely and said it's just time for me to do something else.
Yeah.
And spent 5 years completely away. And then Danny Duggan, who promotes Canadian Wrestling's Elite out of Winnipeg, and he does these monstrous tours. He kind of, lured me back for one match, and I was like, oh, you know what, that feels pretty good still. I think maybe I got a few more left, and sort of back in passively. But in the meantime, like I've had a lot of moves, and as you're moving around, I didn't really actively involved in the wrestling business anymore. Got rid of most of the memorabilia, or either sold it off or gave it away to serious collectors. But at one point, I had, I think, 18 bankers boxes full of wrestling magazines from the 1950s to the present. And I think now there's sort of the jewel of the collection, and I bring it out to show off from time to time, is when I've been doing these career records. What I've been doing now is, when I give the record to the wrestler himself, I
don't know what's going on there.
There's a little cage behind me, and the a 4-pound Chinese crested has just made his bedtime. Sorry on that.
I was just trying to no sell it.
I think she's drawing heat right now. That was the title we couldn't think of before, drawing heat.
So what I've done with the career record books is, as I would do the record, I would and give it to the wrestler, I would print an extra copy of the cover and just have them sign that back to me. So I've got this binder with career record books for Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, Terry Funk, Ric Flair. So it's about 50 or 60 of these autographed covers, and now some of those guys have passed away. So it's like just a unique piece of memorabilia that nobody else in the world has. So that's probably the collection that I treasure the most.
That's cool. Yeah.
That is pretty cool. I'll buy it if you're selling it. So
I mean, look, we have his head there. He's got all these action figures.
Oh, Kenny, you have like a house full. I don't
know what you're talking about.
So, Vance, do you have any advice for somebody who was looking to get into wrestling, like on the independent scene at all? Or
my best advice is don't do it.
That's my advice too.
So I think the wrestling business has changed so much, even from when I broke in. When I broke in '93, you don't realize it at the time, but now I do, looking back. Wrestling at that time was at an all-time low. You were just coming off the death of the territories. For me, when I was starting, I thought, well, this is great because you got all these guys who had worked the territories and had made money, and they know how to make money. So they're the guys running the show. But in a lot of cases, they were really bitter about, the fact that, that there wasn't full-time territories and weekly salaries for wrestling anymore, but also not motivated to create something at that level again. So wrestling once every 2 weeks at a local community center was enough for them. But still, you had these guys coming through. Like for me, the veterans that would come through and travel at the time, Rick Patterson, who is most famously wrestled as Leatherface in Japan for IWA Japan and some of the promotions there. There was Eddie Watts, who was a junior heavyweight champion and later tag team champion in Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon. Had also wrestled in Mexico and all over Canada. And so you had some of these guys who were really credible and, still very well traveled and connected to help, make some relationships. And so it was actually through Eddie Watts that got me out of Winnipeg and got me my first opportunity wrestling for Emile Dupree and the Maritimes. But, the opportunities to tour now have changed significantly. There's fewer and fewer tours. and what I've seen even, even in the 5 years that I was away and then have come back, is you have this very entitled generation of young wrestlers who only wrestle within 50 miles of their home, that walk around like they're superstars, and are completely oblivious to the fact when they actually walk into a room with somebody that knows what they're doing, has made money in this business, can give them advice to help them make money in this business. And so, I'm really discouraged and a little bit pessimistic about the future of wrestling on the independents. I think there's, as we see, a lot of guys have been called up, and there's never been a better time to be a talented independent wrestler in terms of the opportunities to get attention of somebody, with the volume of talent that's needed to run things at a top level right now. Guys, that maybe were considered too small a decade ago, now have outlets through NXT or AEW or Impact, and are excelling, and that's fantastic to see. But my sincere advice would be, if you're going to get into professional wrestling, make sure that you get the right start. So really research the school that you're planning to attend, to make sure that they actually have a pedigree of producing talent, and that they can help you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. If you are telling a trainer that your goal is to get to the WWE and they say they can get you there, you know what? I don't know any trainer right now that is comfortable enough to guarantee that, the certificate of completion of their training program is even going to get you a tryout, let alone a contract.
Right.
So, beware of, sort of a buyer beware of any claims that are made. And also just be aware of the promoters that you're getting involved with, because not everybody's reputable. A lot of people can give you a match. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have your long-term career interest at heart.
Right.
And so that's what I would say.
My prediction is that if I were starting anything in wrestling right now, as soon as the pandemic is over and people can go out, you could have a wrestling match at a high school with 1,000, and it will be packed. It'll be sold out. Any event will be sold out for like the first 3 months. It doesn't matter what it is.
Curling? You think curling?
Yes, I think anything.
Those old people are itching to get back to the curling rink, I'll tell you. Yeah, I think I'm of the same feeling. When things first shut down, I mean, we did our last event here in Vancouver for All Star Wrestling on March the 7th. Everything shut down the week after. And we were sort of watching the phases, and it's like, okay, we're in phase 1, and we anticipate that, things are going to be shut down. And they didn't give us a time frame, as we're all operating with now. But we were sort of watching the phases, and it was, okay, now we're in phase 2 in June. Okay, start of July, we're into phase 3. We're thinking, okay, September 1st. I mean, we typically, things are slow here in the summertime anyway. So typically we take that time off because the weather's so nice. Everyone wants to be outside. They don't want to be in a sweaty hall watching wrestling. So we thought, yeah, September we'll be back in business. And now with schools reopening, and now we're hearing sort of, there's a second wave coming, and we're going to continue to keep things closed down and monitored. We're trying to find ways to innovate. Because for guys like myself who are beyond 40 years old, I've got lots of time and patience to wait for something to happen. But wrestlers are young guys; they're in their 20s and they want things to happen right now. So you got a lot of impatient guys that we want to get back into the ring so that they don't make irresponsible decisions, and do things that are going to compromise their professional integrity, elsewhere. So we're trying to find a way.
So that might be a good segue. We're going to do this ColleCon thing. Cauliflower Alley Club was postponed or canceled this year, I guess, the regular one, the reunion that everybody knows. So we decided to kind of borrow from our COVIDCon platform, in which this guy up here is going to get a bunch of people together and do little interviews just like this. And that's how we did this originally. This StreamYard cast was two full days of programming. We every half an hour we put another guy in, and it did really well. And we did a second one, and now this one is for Cauliflower Alley Club, and we're doing a fundraiser, so it'll be $9.99 on Fight TV. Vance, were you going to jump in with Brian? He said he was going to have a few people. I don't know if you're one of them, or I think he said yes. Actually, maybe you don't even know it, but to open the show, I think.
Yeah, maybe I am. I
think so.
I haven't been informed yet, but I'm very excited. That you guys are taking this on. The Cauliflower Alley Club. I think originally when I got involved with the club, 10 years ago, I wasn't even fully aware of sort of the work that they do. It was just, there's going to be kind of this wrestling reunion, and there's going to be all of these legend guys there, and that's where I want to go. I want to go and hang out and drink a beer with Dick Bayer, the original Destroyer.
Right.
Hear their road stories. It wasn't until later on, and actually, I myself was a beneficiary of the support through the Cauliflower Alley Club. So in 2015, I was out of the wrestling business and had just started a new job, and discovered that I needed to have a spinal fusion of my lower back because I had some discs that were completely deteriorated. And so I went in to see the specialist, and he showed me, here's what we're going to do. It's going to be 2 screws this long with pivot heads, and your C4 to C6, vertebrae are now going to be fused together. And I was like, okay, this sounds fine. And he said, you're going to feel immediate relief from your pain. And I didn't believe him, because I'd been sort of like struggling with it for several months before it got diagnosed. But you will need to be off work for 6 weeks. And I was like, I just started this job. I don't even have health benefits yet to cover a leave like that. How am I going to survive and keep my family afloat? So fortunately, I was able to reach out as a member through the Cauliflower Alley Club and say, hey, here's the situation that I'm facing right now. I'm required to be out of commission for 6 weeks. And the Benevolent Fund sent me a check to help me out.
Very nice.
Wow.
And so I know they've done a lot of that stuff for wrestlers, whether it's for medical needs, or they now are in a wheelchair, so they require a wheelchair accessible van, or due to natural disasters, now their home has been destroyed because of hurricanes or something like that. So there's so much work, and there are so many stories behind the scenes that we can't share with the public just due to the privacy and integrity of the people involved. But if people truly knew the scope of how much this organization has helped some of the stars over the years with needs that are sort of beyond the scope of what their own health protections allow, I think we would have people lining up to support. So I'm, I tip my hat to you guys, and very excited for ColleCon. And whether I'm on a panel or not, I plan to tune in and support and check it out.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. So some of the names so far, we're starting off with DDP and then Eric Bischoff. The Bushwhackers reunited. A lot of people don't know Butch has not really been in the scene for a long time. No. Butch has been in New Zealand for 10 years, 15 years or so, probably as long time. When I first started in 94, 95, he was around 5 or 6 years, and then he was gone. So I think he's been gone since then. Coco, Fred Ottman, Jeff Jarrett, I believe, Al Snow, Blue Meanie, Medusa. And there will be these other surprises. Like today, Brian Blair shoots me a text message. By the way, Steve Kern, somebody else in the Big Show. That was the Big Show. Wow. All right. That's cool. Right.
Awesome.
That's so the people listening now, that'll get a surprise. It's not really advertised. As Vance knows, we advertised it as October 4th. We were running unopposed, and then all of a sudden NXT took over our time slot. So we had to kick it back to October 3rd. And while Saturday night's not our first choice, keep the thing together, it seems to be the best move, to go unopposing WWE.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah. So,
exciting stuff.
Yeah, so it should be pretty cool. That'll be on Fight TV October 3rd. It'll start at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Should be a new mini panel of usually a couple of people every half an hour. You can join up to this if you're seeing this somewhere else. Wrestling Bookmarks to ask questions here free to Eddie, who'll put them on the bottom of the screen. And I think we may also, Eddie, we didn't talk about this yet, but we'll probably do a hashtag, an official hashtag for it.
Yep.
So CAC, ColleaCon, and we may have you like scan through Twitter a little bit to find some questions as well, so we can get a different social media input on that. So.
Okay. Yeah, we should definitely start doing that too. But
cool.
Yeah.
And Vance, if you want to try to book a couple of people, and throw them in there as surprises, what I think Eddie will say is pretty funny for COVID Con. Once in a while, a couple guys be talking, and all of a sudden, like we had, I think it was Bushwhacker Luke and Fred Ottman are talking in a little panel, and all of a sudden, I would have someone do a run-in, so I would give them a link, and all of a sudden, Gilbert shows up for no reason at all,
Sure.
and Gilbert starts talking to him. So
Yeah.
little surprises like that are fun if we can make them make sense and throw the guys off a little bit, but have some fun. Oh, look at now Gilbert walked in the room.
Nice.
So
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a lot of fun.
be fun, yeah.
Oh, we didn't even talk about Road Warrior. Devastating. Couldn't believe that.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
He was scheduled to be on the ColleaCon, by the way.
Yeah.
I think we're replacing with Hornswoggle, but I don't know that that's a.
I don't know if that's apples to apples, but
yeah.
yeah.
So, super nice guy though.
Yeah, he was really nice.
Really cool.
Kenny, how did you hear the news? When did you hear the news?
Well, I've got this ongoing thing where I always write blank has died. And it's just very plain and what have you. And it doesn't have to even be wrestling. It could be anything. But so people have come to know that I write that, and they send me immediately ridiculous amounts of Tiny Tim has died or whatever, and then I post it right away.
Yeah.
I've become the has died. There's kind of a funny story behind that I haven't told all that many times, but for probably about 20 years now, I've been texting Jeff Jarrett, blank has died, the moment that they've died. And he's just like, what the hell? And I always sign it with love, the ghost of professional wrestling. And he didn't know who it was. It was more of an indie guy. I didn't work with him that much. So I did that for about 20 years. And then finally he rolled into my neck of the woods about 5 years ago. And I waited in a line, and I put my $10-15 down on the table, and he said, "Oh, hey kid, how do you want me to fill out the 8x10? You want me to personalize it?" I said, "Yes, to the ghost of professional wrestling." And he stopped. He was like, "You son of a bitch," for pranking him for so many years like that. So I'm romancing him though. I'm trying to get to write his book one day. I'd like to. I think he'd be real good autobiography to write.
I think so. Yeah.
You got another book in you, Vance, or what? I think you must.
Yeah. You know what? I've been asked from time to time, to take projects on. It's been kind of a challenge on time commitment. So there's been some projects that I've sort of had in the hopper and have passed along. For example, there's a upcoming biography on George Gordienko, who was sort of a legendary Canadian shooter in the 40s and 50s, and was just starting to get his career going in the United States in that period of time when everybody was suddenly a communist and that witch hunt was on. And of course, having the name Gordienko, made him like a target. And so he was actually kicked out of the United States and then went to Europe and became a very big star there. His nephew, who lives in Victoria, British Columbia, has been a champion of the project. And we had talked about it a number of times, and just timing wasn't aligned. So I've now passed on all the research for that project to Stephen Verrier, who did the Kaniski book and a book on the Pacific Northwest. So he's currently working on that project. But
cool.
And then I was working on Tony Condello's biography with him, and then things got way too carny for me, and so I got out of that. But there could be some more projects on the go, and particularly, if things are shut down, still, and I'm home anyway, then might as well put that creative energy to work.
You know, it's funny. I've had the opposite effect with all the extra free time at home. I don't know if it made me more lazy, but I'm not creative right now. I'm doing the virtual stuff and helping behind the scenes, but when I try to write, it hasn't been as good as it was in the past. And I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit bummed about all this stuff or what it is, but my creative juices have been quarantined as well, or locked down as well, it seems.
Yeah.
So
it could be, you know what, when we originally got shut down, you know, I was thinking, oh yeah, we're going to be shut down for 4 weeks. And, you know, let's just think of a project that keeps All-Star Wrestling relevant in the meantime. So I said, hey, why don't I, you know, write a yearbook / media guide for All-Star that kind of celebrates, pardon me, because to 2020 is the 90th anniversary of wrestling in British Columbia. And so I said, let's actually like do it upright and have like the full title history, you know, dating back as far as we can go, and you know, all of the data, and tell some stories. So they said, yeah, that's good. And I said, yeah, this should probably take me about a month or two. But like, there's nothing going on. Like, you know, kids soccer is not happening, and you know, all of these other outings that I'd be committed to are also not on the go. So it took me about 8 weeks, you know, to write it and then drop it into the layout. So we did that. Okay, quarantine is still not up, so we need another project. Okay, well, let's work with this graphic designer and release a retro logo All-Star Wrestling T-shirt with the logo from the 80s.
cool.
So we did that, and then yeah, we're still not back to business yet. Okay, well, we started working with a local video producer here who was the last guy to get TV for professional wrestling in Vancouver, and sent the wrestlers in, and we did a number of promo shoot days where we kind of did like a out of character behind the camera. We're going to ask you some questions. It doesn't, you know, let's talk about your introduction to professional wrestling. Let's talk about, you know, your interesting hobbies and skills outside of wrestling, just so we had some content to put out.
Right.
And so we shot those, and then that project was done, and we had enough content to take us right into November. So I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do next? So we started working with Franklin O'Neill out of Pennsylvania, who's a very fantastic artist.
It's an artist, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just worked with us to do the official All-Star Wrestling coloring book.
Oh, nice. All right.
So we just did, you know, 24 original images. That's now
Cool.
published, and we've got that going on. But yeah, so it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? What's next? So yeah, so we're working on something pretty innovative, I think, you know, in terms of independent wrestling that hopefully we can announce pretty soon.
Cool.
You know, it's just, but yeah, I'm sitting at home, and you know, probably right after I get up this call, I'll be, you know, back onto the research. And
You're doing good under lockdown. I mean, I guess I got a couple things done. We did Sabu versus the Three Little Pigs coloring book also will be out in a couple of weeks.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's almost done. And back around beginning of March, we just finished, and then we put it out in May. So we put it out, Demolition on Mars, which was another coloring book, comic book kind of hybrid, where Demolition goes up to Mars and fights a bunch of clones that look like Superfly Snuka. It's pretty cool. So.
Oh, bizarre.
So, all right, Eddie. I think we should wrap, because see, if you don't tell this to Eddie, what he'll do is he'll
We'll
just
go 3
keep
hours.
going. Oh, he'll just keep going. You gotta tell him.
Yeah, we haven't even dished dirt on anybody. That's awesome.
You want to? if you have, you should.
You know what? I'm always anticipating those questions, because you know, there was sort of a period of time in the early 2000s where I was just kind of took on this reputation as kind of the gatekeeper, and so if a young guy was doing something out of step, I'd be the guy to call him out on it, and it sort of became like the cranky vet in the locker room. And so
you were the one-man wrestler court.
I kind of like this reputation of being the guy that was always stirring the pot. And so whenever I'm doing a podcast or something, I always kind of will tease the All-Star promoter, say, yeah, I'm going to be live. I got a live mic. I'm going to be on the air. So you never know what I'm going to be talking about.
He's got the hot news coming.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the favorite things for me during my career was always the ribs.
Yeah, me too.
Particularly because you would rib the guys that you like, and you really test their character. So that could be a whole episode unto itself.
Yeah, we'll have to have him back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
So now
Vance.
Eddie's
Well,
like, I want to go an extra hour.
Well, we appreciate you coming on tonight, buddy.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was a great time, and best of luck with ColleeCon. I encourage everybody to check it out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and for a great cause.
So Vance, it'll be just like this. We'll send you a link, and probably you'll jump on with Brian Blair and Eddie and open up the show. What we're attempting to do, I don't know if this is possible. We thought about this the other day, to do like a 6:30 to 7 where it's free and you kind of plug and pitch, and talk about a bunch of different stuff. Maybe a bunch of the cauliflower guys are on, and then it bleeds over into the pay of 7, and then DDP will take over, shortly after 7. So I think that's what we're going to do.
Great. Awesome.
Cool. So we'll contact you about a pitch, man.
Yeah, sounds great, guys.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for coming in.
You betcha.
All right. Take care.